Welcome to Breaking Bread with Alie and Gabby. I'm Gabby Loren.
And I'm Alie Valerio.
And today we're going to be talking about how Judaism meets the Matrix. This is a theme you've heard us speak about over and over again in prior broadcasts, but today we're actually dissecting it with a very special rabbi. And we want to go over some of these common themes we are seeing in the Matrix and how it can connect to spirituality and different philosophies that we learn from Torah.
Amen. So today we have a very special guest. His name is Rabbi Shalom Denbo, all the way from Los Angeles, California. He's a Torah teacher and certified Moel. He's also the founder of AE Pi Jerusalem Road Trips, an established partner between AISH and Alpha Epsilon Pi Fraternity. He created the AE Pi's annual Jewish Identity Educational Leadership Conference and sits on their International Board of Rabbis. Rabbi Denbo is also the executive director for Kalal, an Education Leadership Institute, and his first book, and only book for now, which is The 7 Traits, is amazing. So make sure you guys check it out. He's also a featured speaker for AISH, a huge organization around the world. So thank you, Rabbi Denbo, for being here. We're excited to have you and just finally talk about the Matrix. So let's talk about it.
Thank you for having me.
So we see a lot of these common themes in the 3 movies that are out, and special enough, if you guys love these movies, they're actually working on a 4th Matrix currently. But we see ideas of reality versus illusion and that free will versus divine providence that we talked about with Rabbi Yonah in a previous episode. Also, what is what we know and what really is anything? Ignorance is bliss is another topic. We also have themes like character themes of, Neo, Trinity, the Nebuchadnezzar. Also, the idea of the one, could that be the Messiah? So, Rabbi Denbo, can we start with maybe talking about reality versus illusion? How do we know what is real, and how can you connect what we see in the Matrix being like everybody's in this, technology and it's being controlled from a control center and there's an architect? Well, how does that connect to Jewish principles and what we're learning?
That's probably the hardest question that anyone has to grapple with is, how do we know what we know? How do we be sure of anything? Maybe this is all a dream, which is the premise of the movie. That maybe this is all just some manipulation of some higher intelligence and we're just going through the motions. And that's probably the greatest struggle of any individual, is figuring out what is real. And that's probably the first question that anyone should grapple with, is what is real? Most importantly, who am I? Am I just something that someone else has formulated, or perhaps even myself? Even what I project into the world, even if this isn't a dream, what I project into the world, is that really me? And, it's ironic in the movie, when you're in the Matrix, my assumption is everyone who's watching this has seen the movie, so I don't think we need to go through the plot lines of the movie, but in the movie, when you're in the Matrix, Morpheus tells Neo that this is the mental projection of ourselves. And what's fascinating is we live in a time where, suffice it to say, we are not trapped in some computer, but yet so much of our lives are projected through a computer. And we are fabricating this image of who we think we are as we project it and we upload it and we interact on a level that is, especially in this time that we're in, where everyone's kind of holed up in their phones, so to say. How do you figure out what's real, both on a macro level and on a micro level? And I think that that's really a challenge that people grapple with on an ongoing basis. And Judaism would say that there is a way to know what's real. And the way to know what's real is, first and foremost, is to be in touch with your consciousness, is to be at least alert. And the very start is, if you're asking the question, that already is enough to start the process. In the movie, Morpheus says, have you ever been in a dream that's so real that you're not sure, are you awake or are you dreaming? So when you're in a dream, not to roll over into another movie, but there's another movie out there about dreams, Inception. And there they have the ability to actually be conscious of the fact that they're in a dream. Whereas in life, when we're asleep and we're in a dream, when we're conscious that it's a dream, then it's no longer a dream. It's all when we're in the dream, we don't know that we're dreaming. As soon as we're conscious, oh my God, this is a dream, that's usually when we've woken up, or it's right at the point when we wake up. And therefore, Judaism would actually say that there's a little bit of reality to that. That as long as you're asking the question, that's the first step of engaging in life. What is real? Who am I? What's life about? And I think that as long as you're asking that question, that will begin the process of figuring out what's real.
So with that being said, how would you even know when the Messiah comes and the Mashiach comes, who the Mashiach is, and how do you know to trust this person?
How do you know to trust this person? A colleague of mine in Israel, I wouldn't say a colleague, he's certainly a mentor, he's leagues ahead of me, right? Monty Berger, he says that, probably the greatest dichotomy between the Matrix and Judaism, aside from the fact that this wasn't made by observant Jews, this movie was not made by people that I would say have an incredible touch of reality. Suffice it to say, I don't want to get into a political discussion, but aside from that, this movie does have an incredible amount of profound wisdom, as well as a lot of insights that are very, very connected to traditional Judaism and traditional Jewish thought, with one exception. That one exception is that word one. That neo, ironically enough, and there were no accidents when the authors wrote the movie, when the script writers wrote the movie, neo is just one rearranged. Neo is the one, and the only way that the matrix can be defeated, the only way that the system can be overrun is through the one, is through Neo, the prophecy of this one individual coming and being able to fix the situation. And that is the greatest dichotomy, I would say, maybe not the greatest, but one of the most stark differential points between Judaism and Christianity, is that we don't believe in this concept that there's going to be the one that's going to come and save the world. It's actually incumbent upon each and every one of us to save the world. And the Mashiach is a result of that. In Judaism, the Mashiach is the byproduct of our actions. Not the way Christianity understands it, that the Mashiach will be the catalyst of our actions. And that, what I mean is that according to Christianity, the Mashiach has to come, the Messiah has to come, and he has to be the catalyst that fixes the world, that brings in that final redemption. And Judaism says, no, on the contrary. Yes, there is going to be a Messiah. There is going to be someone that's going to come along and save the world in terms of a leadership position. But that individual, whoever that individual is only going to come as a result of our actions. We are the ones that will be the catalyst that will either change the world for the better. We will bring in this utopian existence by fixing ourselves. And through the actions that we go through fixing ourselves, the natural byproduct of that will be, okay, now the world is ready for this utopian leader to step in. Or alternatively, God forbid, our actions will take us stumbling down a different route, and our actions will bring the world to a place where there is no hope that we will fix it. And again, it will only because of our actions that will bring in a leader that will have to swing the pendulum back. So we don't believe in this concept of the Messiah is coming to save the day. So on the first hand, the way we'll know that the Messiah comes, back to your question, Gabrielle, the way we'll know Messiah comes is very simple. It'll just be a natural progression of the way the world is working. It will just come about as a natural cause and effect. And it won't be so much that will be, oh, is that the Messiah? Is that the Messiah? It'll be more like, oh yeah, that's the Messiah. It'll be just a given that, yeah, that's the Messiah. Secondly, and this goes right back to the Torah, when Moses, who was the first quote unquote Messiah, so here's another misconception that's out there. The word Messiah comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, as you pronounce, but the word Mashiach doesn't mean savior. It just means anointed. It just means the anointed one. And the anointed one was a process that someone went through. For example, when we had a temple in Jerusalem, the priests that worked in the temple, they had to be anointed to go and do their service. The king was anointed when he took his position on the throne. So that's where they got the idea, the anointed one is going to be the king. Well, that first quote unquote leader that we had was a man by the name of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. And when Moses was sent to Egypt to take the Jews out of Israel, an incredible thing. It says that Moses says, how do I know that they'll believe in me? They won't believe in me. And God punishes him for questioning the Jewish people. The Jewish people will believe you. And that's why Moses was told, if they don't believe you here, throw the stick to the ground, it turns into a snake, some water will turn to blood. And then the third thing was, Moses was told, take your hand and stick it under your robe. You wore a robe, not a jacket. Stick it under your robe and take your hand out. And it became covered with saras. It became covered with some kind of skin blemish. They often translate it as leprosy, but that's not what it was. It was some type of skin blemish. Now, God could have shown Moses multiple signs. He specifically showed him a sign that was an affliction to his body because Moses said something inappropriate. He says, the Jewish people won't believe me. The Jewish people will believe him, and they did believe him. And what did he do? But he did through the signs. It says that he did have to throw the snake down and show everybody the snake. And then, so it seems a little bit of a dichotomy, a contradiction. God says, no, they will believe you, but yet the Torah goes on to say that he did have to throw the stick down. But if you juxtapose that with the story when Moses goes to Pharaoh, when he goes to Egypt to tell Pharaoh, I'm here to take the Jewish people out. And Pharaoh says, who is this God that sent you? And Moses says, oh, you want to know who this God is? And he throws the stick down. And what happens in the Torah? The Torah says that when Pharaoh saw him throw the stick down, he laughed at him. He laughed at him and he called in all the school kids. And he called in all the school kids to come in with their little sticks and throw their little sticks down, and their sticks turned to snakes as well. Now, a miracle happened, and Moses' snake, quote unquote, turned back into a stick. And as a stick, it ate all the snakes. And that Pharaoh's children weren't able to duplicate. And that's when Pharaoh knew, uh-oh, this is real. But just throwing the stick down wasn't enough. Pharaoh laughed at it. So you have to ask the question, how come the Jewish people, when he threw the stick down, the Torah says they believed Moses. But when he threw the stick down for Pharaoh, Pharaoh laughed at him. And the answer is actually quite simple, but yet very profound. And the answer is that when the Jewish people told Moses to throw the stick down, they weren't asking for proof. They were just asking for a sign. They were asking for a sign. Pharaoh was asking for proof. When Moses came into Egypt and he says, God sent me, Pharaoh says, prove it. And so Moses throws down a stick and it turns into a snake, and Pharaoh laughs at him and says, you call that a proof? That's like you and I striking a match. That's like you and I going to MIT and saying, hey guys, let me show you this really cool magic that I can do. And we take out a matchbook and we strike a match. I created fire. It's absurd. It's childish. That was the stick turning into a snake. That's the whole point. It's childish. And so Pharaoh laughs at him, because if you're asking for proof, that's being childish. That means you just want to be wowed. You're not supposed to be wowed in life. You're supposed to think intellectually. And after you think intellectually, then there's the big challenge. And to bring it back to the movie Matrix, there's a great line. There's so many great lines in that. It's towards the end of the movie, when Neo saves Trinity from the helicopter. You know, it's about to crash, and he just stands up and he twirls the rope around and he catches a helicopter. Now, that's what you think, but on the other side, she shoots the rope that she grabs on, but still it doesn't, the momentum, even though she shoots and the helicopter drops and she's left with the rope, physics would have said that the momentum of Neo being pulled by the helicopter would have continued to go, even though the helicopter is not attached. But he's able to just stand upright and not fall off the building and pull her up. And Morpheus comes and says, now do you believe? And Neo says, Morpheus, I have to tell you something that the Oracle told me. And Morpheus stops him and says, the Oracle told you exactly what you needed to hear at that moment. Do you see? He then says, do you see there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path? Those are two stages. We might intellectually know something's true, but that's very different than living it. Do you see the Jewish people, when Moses showed up and said, I'm here, God sent me to take you out of Egypt, the last thing the Jewish people are going to say is, prove it. They're going to say, who are you? They're not going to say, prove it. They're going to say, who are you? Tell us. What do you know about God? You see, someone shows up and says, I'm the Messiah. You know what the first question we're going to ask him? We're not going to ask him walk on water. We're not going to ask him resurrect the dead. We're going to say, what do you know about life? Can you teach me? Can you teach us about life? Can you share with us insights of the Torah, of Judaism, of how we're supposed to be living our life? Let's see if you actually understand life before we then say, are you actually the leader that's going to bring us to that next level? So
is it safe to say that we have like an inner faith naturally by being Jewish, that our faith like supersedes?
On the contrary, we're the greatest skeptics that ever existed. The Torah itself says that. The Torah itself says that we are the most stiff-necked people. 2 Jews, how many opinions? Everyone says 3. Everyone says 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I say, no, it's 4. Just because I don't want to agree with that. Everyone, we're the most stiff-necked. So that's why when Moses shows up, it's like, who are you? Who are you? And after Moses intellectually demonstrates that he is indeed someone that has a relationship with the Almighty, now they intellectually understand it. You know what's lacking? The emotion. So for that, they say, all right, we just want to feel it now. Throw the stick down to the ground. And so that Moses throws the stick down to the ground. And that was wrong. We shouldn't have wanted that. So it's true that Moses says they're not going to believe me. And on some essence, Moses was right. They intellectually understood that I'm the one who's going to take them out of Egypt, but they just don't feel it. And that's the greatest challenge. Knowing what we know is true and then feeling it and living it. That is a great challenge. And that's why Morpheus said it's a difference between knowing the truth and walking the truth. And if given the choice, which obviously is an overlying theme of this movie, given the choice, when you sent me the email, this podcast is called, which pill would you take? Sadly, most people would not have chosen the red pill. Most people would take the blue pill. But you wouldn't have a movie. if Neo took the blue pill, the movie's over. You don't have a movie.
That's so funny. That's true.
But if you think about it, that's true about every movie. Most movies are about people that are not the average person making the average choices. And that's why we connect so much with movies. The reason we connect so much with movies is because we all know that for the most part, every single human being, this is Jew, non-Jew, every human being, if there is one common denominator, every single one of us knows that we are not living our potential. Every single one of us knows that on some level, and this is why the movie resonates so much, every single one of us knows that on some level, we are just going through life in a pod, just being intravenously fed and just serving, quote unquote, the system. And we're just going through the motions, as what's his, the character, the trader, the one who sells them out, Cypher. Right, that's his name. As Cypher said when he, towards the end of the movie, when he's the one who came back to the ship and they were still in the Matrix, and he's on the phone with Trinity, and he says, I'm tired of this. And he says, you know what I'm tired of? The monotony. I'm tired of the monotony. And that is so true. So much of life is a monotony. Think about it. Day in, day out, day in, day out. It's just one day after another. It just rolls into okay, and then we're done. And it made no difference whether you were in the Matrix or you weren't in the Matrix. It was a monotony. Like he was fooling himself thinking that in the Matrix it was different. How's it any different? It was the same thing, day in and day out and day in and day out.
So how do you break that chain, Rabbi Denbo, of not living in monotony, whether you're in the Matrix, quote unquote, or not in the Matrix? In a Jewish sense.
In a Jewish sense, the only way is to realize that it's a matrix. The only way to break out of the monotony is to come to the understanding, as the little boy said, don't try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. There is no spoon. You cannot break the monotony of life. That's impossible. You have to eat. You have to go to the bathroom. You have to get a job. You have to put clothes on, unless you want to go live in a nudist colony, and that's just an escape from all of this. And then that becomes the monotony. Everything just becomes the monotony. It's just a different uniform. That's all. You cannot bend the spoon. That's impossible. You have to realize there is no spoon. That this world that we are surrounded by is the matrix. And it's not who we really are. We are a soul. You see, and that's where the movie, they almost got it, but they missed it. They almost got it, and they got this close, but they couldn't, because they can't sell that. That won't sell. When Neo asks Morpheus, what happens when you die in the matrix? And Morpheus says, the body can't live without the mind. You see, they got that close, but they didn't get it because they can't sell what's really being said there. And that is, you're not a body, you're a soul. You can't sell that in Hollywood. You can sell the mind, oh, the mind. But the body cannot exist without the mind is true, but the soul doesn't need either. The soul doesn't need the body. The soul doesn't need the mind. The soul just needs to understand that it is a spark of the infinite.
Amazing.
And a spark of the infinite is unstoppable, is all-powerful with the help of the Almighty. And that's why when Neo asks Morpheus, what are you trying to tell me, that I can dodge bullets? And Morpheus says back, what I'm trying to tell you is that when you understand the truth, you won't have to. You won't have to dodge bullets. And at the end of the movie, he just says no. And the bullets stop in midair. When we understand that this is not us, it's us putting up our hands and saying no. And it all stops in midair. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve eat from the tree. And they make a perilous error in judgment. And they eat from the tree. And the Torah says explicitly, what happens when you eat from the tree? You will die. And our understanding of the infinite almighty Hashem, creator of the universe, is not that it's a punishment. See, that's a child. When you're a child, all you see of mom and dad is they punish me. It's only once you become an adult, and sometimes that happens when you move out, sometimes that happens when you get married, sometimes that happens when you have children, and sometimes, sadly, it doesn't happen until very late in life. But at some point, a person becomes an adult and they have the ability to look back and say, Mom and Dad weren't just punishing me. They were trying to educate me. They were trying to teach me a lesson. And that is our understanding of Hashem, that the Almighty is always trying to teach us lessons. So what's the lesson of saying to Adam and Eve, if you eat from that tree, you will die? Because if you look in the Torah, you see very clearly what happens. As soon as they eat from the tree, they say the following, we're naked. The Torah tells us before they ate from the tree, the Torah says explicitly, Adam and Eve were in the garden and they were naked and they weren't ashamed. Now, the only reason to say they weren't ashamed, by definition, actual explicit understanding of just reading comprehension there, means they were aware that they were naked. Otherwise, the statement that they weren't ashamed is meaningless. Don't say they weren't ashamed, say they weren't aware. To say they weren't ashamed means they were aware. So they obviously were aware they were naked. So what transpired between before eating the tree and after eating the tree? When they eat from the tree, the Torah says they were aware they were naked and they were ashamed. Before, they weren't ashamed. If you had said to Adam and Eve, prior to eating from the tree, if you were the snake and you slithered up to them, even though the snake didn't slither, whole separate discussion, another podcast. If you were the snake and you slithered up to Adam and Eve and you said, hey, Adam and Eve, you're naked. You know what they would have turned to you and said? They would have laughed at the snake. They would have said, I'm not naked. That's my horse. It's like a horse and a rider. If the horse, a horse and a rider, a dear friend of mine just got married, his daughter, he just married off his daughter. And because of this whole Corona nonsense things, they couldn't have a wedding like they were supposed to, but he wanted to do something really special for his daughter. Beautiful thing. So he hired a white horse and carriage. like, Snow White, like a princess thing. And after the wedding, it was a little front yard wedding, small gathering. The bride and groom got in this horse, white chariot. I mean, it was beautiful. And they walked around the block and the community all came out. And so he told me that the person in charge of the horse makes sure to go wherever they're going an hour early and walks the horse around. And you want to know why? I didn't understand why. I was like, why? He didn't know either. So this way the horse can do all of its deeds, because what happens is when a horse walks, they go. And so this person in charge of this thing, they figured out that no one wants to be involved in that. No one wants to be on a horse and buggy and the horse is, doing its thing in the middle of the road. So they do it beforehand. So this way it's done. Could you imagine if you're on a horse and the horse goes in the middle of the street and someone comes up to you and says, hey, you're not supposed to go to the bathroom in the street. What are you doing? You'd look at the person going, I'm not going to the bathroom. My horse is going to the bathroom. I'm just the rider. That's what a horse does. That's what Adam and Eve would have said. If someone said to Adam and Eve before they ate from the tree, hey, you're naked. You're not supposed to be naked. They would have said, I'm not naked. My body's naked. That's not me. I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed that my horse goes in the street. That's what a horse does. It's only once they ate from the tree that they made a distinct change. And you know what happened? They started to look at this as me. This is who I am. And that's when the snake said, whoa, you're naked. Oh my, I'm naked. Because this is now me. And that's why God says, now you have to die. You want to know why you have to die? Because God is teaching humanity a lesson. When you die, you don't cease to exist. Your body ceases to exist. And that is the only thing that is momenting, that's the only thing that's pushing any one of us to really do anything, is the fact that we know this is all going to end one day. And therefore, that reminds us, this is not me, I'm a soul. And that's how close the movie came. That's how close. But they missed it because you can't sell that. So you have to, yeah.
I'm so glad you're talking about the soul, because that's the one thing that I felt was missing from the Matrix too, is like you have your mind and you have your body, but what about your soul? Because in Judaism, that's what we believe the most in, right? And we want to be more like the one. We want to be more like Hashem. So how do we become more like the one so that essentially Mashiach will eventually come?
So that's what I tried to say. That's what I started to say, is that once we realize that this is a matrix, that this isn't who we are our soul, we start to identify with the soul, we start to live like a soul. There's another great line that's just so antithetical to Judaism, but it's so much of what's going on in the world today, and what's so much of what is driving people's decisions, and it's really dangerous, is when they're all sitting in the cafeteria in the mess hall, like probably what they call it on a ship. They're sitting there eating, and they're saying like the slop that comes out of the thing, and Dowser or whatever one of the brothers says, it's everything the body needs. It's a combination of essential vitamins, etc., etc. It's everything the body needs. And the little nerdy kid, he says it's not everything the body needs. It's not everything the body needs, and because he's the one that designed the lady in red. He's like, it's not everything the body needs. And then he says an incredible line that is so antithetical. He says, to deny our impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. And that, Judaism says, is the exact opposite of what it means to be human. What it means to be human is to understand that we are a combination of body and soul. And that unification of body and soul is what makes a human. But only one of them can be the leader. Only one of them can be the one that is making the decisions, the horse and rider. Is the horse deciding where to go, or is the rider deciding where to go? Who's in control of the apple? And when a person understands that it's my soul that is in charge, and that it's my body that has desires, then to deny my desires is not the antithesis of what it means to be human. To understand my desires and to figure out how to not control, but how to direct my desires, how to channel my desires. That is what it means to be a human. To give in to the desires, that's an animal. So when you want to know how do we break out of this matrix, well, the first and foremost step is to wake up. You got to wake up. You got to break out of the cocoon. This is not you. This is not me. That mental image that we project out into the world on Instagram, on Facebook, and even when we're live, but not on Instagram or on Facebook. Even when we're live, we're putting on a whole thing. This is who I am. Stop that. Stop projecting a mental, emotional body image of ourselves and ask ourselves, what soulful image do I want to project into the world? And my desires are there only to do one thing and one thing only. And they are to take the blue pill. When Cypher says the first time Neo and Cypher have an interaction, he walks up on him when Cypher is playing around in the Matrix and he's about to go and be a spy. And Neo walks up and he's like, oh, you scared the bejesus out of me. And he says to Cypher, Cypher says to Neo, so did Morpheus tell you why you're here? And Neo nods and he says, whoa, how do you deal with something like that you're here to save the world? And then Cypher says, let me tell you something, kid. If you see an agent, you do what everyone else does. You run. You run your bleep off. I can't say what he said, but you run your tuchus off. In other words, you quit. In other words, you quit. That is what every single one of us wants to do because that's what the body wants to do. The body just wants to quit. The soul wants to live. You know, I think Thoreau said so beautifully, he said an incredible line. He said that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. That's what most people are. They're in just desperate, like just turn it off because I know that I should be fighting the fight and instead I'm running. And that's desperation. That's why I hate to quote Pink Floyd just because of the anti-Semitism of that leader. But they got it right when they say, I just want to be comfortably numb. Give me the blue pill. I just want to be numb. The body just wants rest. The body just wants rest. The soul wants growth. The soul wants to constantly grow and grow. And that's why when another quote is when Mr. Smith, Agent Smith, when he's in there with Morpheus and he takes out his ear thing and he talks just to Morpheus and he says, I hate this place. I hate it. The sweat, the smell of it. There's something about it. And he says, you know, when we first made the first Matrix, that there were many Matrix made. The first one, it was perfect. Everyone was happy. It was utopia. And it failed. And you want to know why it failed? See, the movie had a different spin on it. But the reason it failed is because it was just static. Everything was perfect. There was nothing to do. There was no challenge. There was no growth. Without growth, then we just become these bodies in a pod, just going through, feeding the system, creating energy for a world that we don't get anything from. The only way we get something is when we grow. And that's from the soul. So to answer your question in a long roundabout way, the way we break out of the matrix is wake up and say, I'm a soul. And a soul wants to grow. And a soul wants to become big, and a soul wants to connect with the infinite. And when I do that, there's nothing I can't accomplish. I can stop the bullets.
That we had entered the matrix because we had lost our souls and we only connected to our bodies and our minds. And because of that, we were in the matrix trying to get out of it because we had lost that connection. That was just like a thought that I just had.
Yeah. I mean, and the irony, you know, the ironies in the movie are constant because the Matrix is constantly playing with us. And it's constantly sending us a message because the one thing I said that every human being knows that we're not living up to our potential. And we all want that. We all want that. And that's why we watch a movie about someone who takes the red pill. We're not going to watch a movie about someone just like us. That's boring. That's boring. But yet look at what Cypher says when he goes back and he's with the agents. He says, I want to forget it all. And I want to be someone important, like an actor. In other words, I want to be the very person that is promulgating the lie, because that means I have power. And that's what we all want. We all want power.
Rabbi, I've really enjoyed this whole conversation. It's pretty amazing to me how you know almost every line from the movie. I'm not sure how many times you've seen this, but I'm very impressed. But overall, I'm just curious. You know, we have the red pill and we have the blue pill, and the red pill is revealing that unpleasant truth. And then the blue pill is kind of remaining in that blissful ignorance. So what are you suggesting in today's world? What pill should we all be taking?
Well, we should obviously be taking the red pill. The question is, what is the pill? Sadly, I don't know, I take that back, it's not sadly, but there is no pill. There's not something that we can just take that will wake us up, that will create an awareness and an understanding of what life is about. But there is the colloquial pill, there is the allegorical pill that needs to be taken. And in the beginning of the movie, when Trinity comes to Neo in that disco ball, which is, I mean, the imagery is so incredible that, that the disco, he's going there, the bar scene, the nightclub, he's going there. And that's a place where people go to connect, interact with other people. But you notice the images that they showed in the movie was all about very, very physical. It was all dancing and very, very intense hyper music, because again, it's all just about our interactions, quote unquote social, is much more about this projection than it is about opening up and sharing and having a real connection. But in that scene, she says to him that the Matrix is looking for you. It's searching for you. And the reality is that it's the exact opposite. It's that deep down, we're all searching for something. Everybody is searching for something. Everyone is searching for meaning, to make our lives not this monotony. And the challenge is that we mistakenly look into the matrix to find it. And we're constantly looking for that next thrill. Prior to this whole COVID, it was all about the next exciting thrill in that world that we could find. And that's what made life so challenging for everybody. What made life so challenging for everybody is that all of a sudden that was taken away from us and we were left alone. And for many people, being left alone is the scariest thing. I remember growing up, you don't have this as much anymore. You have it in a different way. But I remember growing up when you couldn't walk into someone's house where the TV wasn't on, even though no one was in the room watching it. There had to be that white noise in the background. There had to be that distraction from ourselves. And so first and foremost, the very first pill, as I said before, is just an ability to separate. And that's why Shabbos is probably one of the greatest gifts. And that's why the Judaism says that Shabbos is a treasure from Hashem's treasure house. That it's the ability to just shut off and shut down and separate and unplug and pull the thing out from the back and say, okay, I'm now alone. And alone doesn't mean alone physically. You're with your family, you're with your friends, but it means I'm alone and the only thing I have to connect with others is myself. And at that point, I have a choice to make. Do I continue to project this matrix image of myself, or do I project myself? Do I open up and share? So the first way we have to take a pill is to realize that we have to be able to separate from the matrix. The second way, interestingly enough, maybe the movie was alluding to this or not, I'm not sure, but the way they're able to go into the matrix and control the matrix not having control over them is by going into what Morpheus called, this is our construct. Remember when he first took Neo in, this is our construct. This is where we can come in and we can talk about the matrix without being in the matrix. And then Neo goes, you mean I know Kung Fu? Like, how do I? Yes, you do now. And he wakes up and he goes to Morpheus. I know Kung Fu. And he says, show me. How did he know Kung Fu? Because the little guy on the computer, he took a disc. Remember, you probably don't even know what a disc is. People see that movie, they're like, what is that thing?
100%.
So he took a disc and he shoved the disc in the computer, and that uploaded Kung Fu into his brain. That's the pill. It's just not a disc, and it's not uploading into your brain, but it is wisdom. The pill of our time, the pill that we have to take, is wisdom. Learning what life is about. The more we learn, the more we understand ourselves. My rabbi who taught me said, if you don't know yourself, you don't know anything. The more we learn who we are, the more we understand how the soul works. How does the soul interact with the body? How does the soul interact with the world around it? The more we learn and understand that, the more of the pill that we are taking in, the more we're able to not allow the matrix to control us, but on the contrary, the more we're able to just say no. The less we know, the less wisdom we have, the more susceptible we are to allowing the matrix to control us. And when I say the matrix control us, it's not some computer, it's not a machine, it's just ourselves. Habit. Human beings are creatures of habit. And there's a scientific phenomena that applies to humans as well, called the path of least resistance. That's a physical reality in science, that if you pour water when the rain comes down on the mountains, how that rain gets down the mountain is actually called the path of least resistance. It just works its way down, but it works its way down with the least resistance, the least struggle. And that's what we do as well. When we are in a situation where we don't know what to do, then we just go with the path of least resistance. We go with what's habit. And when we don't have wisdom, the most destructive thing we have is this feeling of inadequacy, fear, doubt, disbelief. And when we don't believe in ourselves, we don't think we can do it, we just go with the habit. And whatever is the easiest, most comfortable, that's the blue pill. So that's the answer to your question. What's the red pill of today? Wisdom. What's the blue pill of today? Ignorance. Not like Cypher said, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is comatose. But to flip over to that movie Inception, where they go in and they go into sleep, where he took him into the basement and he's like, they come here to sleep? And he says, no, they come here to wake up. And that's the only time they can dream is here. Otherwise they can't. That's the blue pill. It's not bliss. Their lives aren't bliss, but they just don't know any better. There's this great cartoon that tried to convey the idea of ignorance as bliss. I forget but it's just one square, and it's one scene. It's a person sitting in a throne in this massive room, and behind him is a picture of himself on a throne, and standing in front of the throne are 3 doctors in white lab coats. And the caption under is, your real name is so-and-so. This has just been a scientific experiment. You're free to go now. And like, I'm not the king. I'm not, like, what? And the answer is no. Now, there's a great dichotomy there, a great dilemma. Which would you rather be? Would you rather be the guy on the throne and those 3 people in the white coats not telling you that it's just a scientific experiment and go on believing you're the king? Or no, get up and walk out the door and find out, who am I? And as much as I would tell you, most people will sadly identify with, let me stay on the throne, most people sadly will identify with the blue pill. We all know that that's not bliss. That's why we watch the movie of the guy taking the red pill. Because to go to another movie, that's the Truman Show. I don't know if you know that movie. But that's the whole point of the Truman Show. He's living this amazing life, but it's not real. And we don't want him to stay in that world. We want him to find the exit.
I feel like the message I'm hearing from you is also like breaking out of your comfort zone, because knowing more truth and having more wisdom is getting a little bit uncomfortable
Very
in the
uncomfortable.
process.
It's
Yeah.
very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And that's why Neo says to Morpheus, I can't go back, can I? That shows that there's a struggle. But Morpheus says, no, but would you want to? And the people, the creators of the movie, brilliantly didn't have him answer that question.
It's very interesting. And it also goes back to the saying, like, nothing good comes easy also. And that
Nothing good
balance
comes
that you talk about all the time in classes is the balance between pain and pleasure. You can't
That's
have
right.
one without the other.
You cannot have one without the other. And the only way to get that pleasure is through wisdom. Wisdom is the tool necessary to get pleasure.
And to
Because
connect,
wisdom is the ultimate tool of power.
to connect what you were saying before too, I feel like the more wisdom you seek out and the more connected you are to your soul as opposed to your ego's projections, the more you're able to receive those downloads, not even uploads, but downloads from Hashem.
That's
to
right.
live a better life and to live more in a purposeful life.
That is absolutely correct.
So, Rabbi, to kind of wrap this all up,
Please.
this has been such an interesting time that we're living in. We just went through COVID.
Scary time.
Everyone's at home. We're like trying to figure out who we are. But on the plus side, a lot of us have become more introspective and been able to connect to Judaism more. And like we created this podcast. So it's been a really great time to kind of be with yourself and to gain all of this wisdom that you're talking about. But now, with what's happening in the world politically and like the different racial tensions that are happening, people are now back to like being out and like being angry and like kind of, I see a lot of going from the spiritual to like the physical. So how do we, in a world that is physical, how do we kind of bring this all together where we can interconnect our souls and our bodies and what we care about so that we can be living in the eyes of Hashem and eventually have Mashiach come?
I mean, it's a very difficult question. It's a very challenging time that we're living in. It's a very confusing time that we live in. And one thing I try very hard to do is not to discuss politics. And the problem with politics is that the world is so split and it's so emotionally charged that to take any position, one side or the other, you immediately alienate yourself from the other side. We've lost the ability to have discussion. We've lost the ability to have interaction and open discussions of goodwill and to be able to say, I disagree with you, and that's okay. We've lost that ability. I really, without discussing the political aspects of the racial tension that's going on in the world, I don't think that this would have exploded in the magnitude that it did had it not been on the cusp of the 3 months of quarantine. I don't think that the explosion would have been as intense had people not been already angered of being cooped up. It's like it's a hot air balloon that's been tied that just keeps getting inflated and inflated. It can't contain itself. Eventually it's going to explode. And what happened was the impetus for that explosion. And as a result, I think you're seeing a lot of things that one has to take a step back and just say, is this really being rational? Judaism is the one that taught that every human being is created in the image of God. The world learned that from us. Nobody else said that. Nobody said that until Abraham came along. Prior to Abraham, there was no concept of equality in humanity. It was the haves and the have-nots. And it wasn't just the have and the have-nots. It wasn't just wealth. It was have value of life and have no value of life. That was a reality until Abraham came along and said, no, every human being is precious. But you can't say that now because of how charged it is. So aside from obviously, yes, we have to figure out a way as a world. We have to figure out a way as America. We have to figure out a way to get past looking at the physical, looking at the matrix of who we are as individuals, and understanding that this is a human being. And this human being has value, and this human being has intrinsic rights to be a human and to live and to try and get close to the Almighty and do as much as I am. We have to be able to get past that. But at the same time, we have to be very, very careful and very diligent in making sure that the passion of wanting that does not cloud our ability to see what is destructive in our decision-making process. And that is really scary what's going on now, because that is what's happening. There is almost a mob mentality of just a snowball of just agendas, just turning into agendas, into more agendas, and it's spiraling out of control. And it's scary where this is going to end. And I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I don't have the ability. The only thing I can say is that focusing on myself and focusing on how I'm to grow as a human being and how I'm to get close to the Almighty and to cultivate my relationship with the Almighty mandates that I cultivate my relationship with other human beings. And if I'm focused on that, then that's going to enable me in a better capacity to make proper decisions when it comes to the political world, when it comes to the social world, when it comes to even my own world. And what am I doing? What do I go out? Do I go to restaurants? I mean, this is across the spectrum. This is a confusing time. Not just who do we vote for, which will play a massive impact on our lives, because it's not just an individual. It's how that individual shapes a whole government. But it's not just that. It's also, how do I project myself? How do I speak up when I see something's injustice? Or do I speak up when I say not just injustice, but what about insanity? Do I speak up when I say that that's insane? Because the danger is if I speak up and I say that that's insane, then I might be labeled someone who's a racist. And it just starts to cloud everything. And then it rolls over to, okay, do I go to a restaurant? Do I sit with someone? Do I sit in the same room with someone over there? Fine, they're not at my table, but what if they get up and go to the bathroom and they walk by me? It's a confusing time we live in. And I don't think that there are any answers that you can just upload or download. I think all we can do is just continue to focus on learning about what Judaism says about how to live the best life possible. And that will enable me to try to make the best decisions possible. Because the one thing I will share with you, going back to the matrix, going back to the disparity between Judaism and every other religion is really a bill of goods, I like to call it. It's selling a false hope. That all you have to do is accept X, Y, or Z, and then that will lead you to eternity. Accept this individual and you will have salvation. Accept this individual, you will have salvation. And Judaism comes along and says, no, you don't accept any individual. You accept that there's an almighty God who created the world and put you in this world to try and do your best. And it's going to be hard work. And if you do that, and you push, and you push, and you push, and you don't run away when you see the agents, but you stand and fight, then yes, you will have pleasure. But it's work. It's hard work. And you'll make mistakes along the way, and you'll fall, and you'll get up. And if you don't get up, then it's over. And that's when, Trinity, she falls down those steps, and she says to herself, get up. And she gets up. But that's what we have to do. We're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things in this world of confusion that are wrong. But you fix it by getting up and going forward. That's the best I have in regards to this.
Wow.
Amazing.
That was Very inspiring and amen, just like Alie said.
Thank you. 1 second before we wrap up, you call this breaking bread. I brought pizza. I thought we were going to eat. I brought bread. We never ate.
How are we allowed to have that pizza? Social distancing. That's
you could have
amazing.
brought your own. We could have ate on the same screen.
I love it. You know what? We need to start doing that. We do call this breaking bread, and then we never bring our own bread. So we have to break bread.
BYOB.
Thank you for bringing your own pizza. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi, where can people connect with you? I know you have books, you do lectures. Where can people find you after they've heard, this episode?
Quarantined in my home.
Do you have an address?
I'm not giving that out. Although it's on Google. It's like everything's on Google. So like the best way to find me is first and foremost, I'm on Facebook, Rabbi Denbo. It's real easy. I'm happy to connect with anybody if they want to ask any questions, reach out, try and learn anything from me. Obviously, I'm going to push my book, 7 Traits. I have no problem pushing my book because I say right in the introduction, it is not my wisdom. It is wisdom that I was very fortunate to be given by my rabbi. So I'm just sharing his incredible insights into life. It's the red pill. That book is the red pill. Read that book. It's taking the red pill to the best that I can give.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much for your knowledge and expertise and for all the movie quotes that we can connect to Judaism. We so appreciate it. And I know people that have watched these movies are going to really appreciate this episode. So
My pleasure. I have other movies if you want to do more.
Yes. Do you want to pitch some right now? Which ones are you interested in?
I'll tell
doing?
you, I'll give you just a handful. First and foremost, one of my favorites, in no particular order, but the original Willy Wonka is unbelievable. The insights in that movie are just awesome. Groundhog Day is excellent. So you got Willy Wonka, you got Groundhog Day. Certainly Shawshank Redemption is just mind-blowing. And that one is just intense. And then Mystic River is that rabbinically friendly? I think it is. It might be 1 or 2 scenes that are. So Mystic River is actually an incredible movie about the dynamics between the male-female relationships. It's an incredible movie. You wouldn't know this by watching. It has nothing to do with it, but it's an underlying theme throughout the movie, the male-female relationship, Mystic River. So those are just some to start off with. Happy to talk about any of them.
We'll have to see more movies, Gabby. Let's do it. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Denbo. This was definitely one of my favorites that we've recorded. It's so insightful. This is probably the best explanation of the Matrix that I've seen. And we look forward to having you next time on another episode of Breaking Bread, and we'll bring our own bread next time.
Yes. So thank you guys again for tuning in. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, comment, give us a thumbs up, and definitely make sure to check in with Rabbi Denbo and purchase his book, 7 Traits, if you want to learn more about the red pill and philosophy of life. It's great. So I will see you guys next time from your 2 favorite Jewish girls and Rabbi Denbo. Bye.
Love you guys.